Hey guys, this is X, and welcome to the third and final chapter of Frost Tanking 101. In this chapter, we'll be talking about the many uses of Chains of Ice. We'll also be talking about ranged Howling Blast and Anti-Magic Shell. Chains of Ice is an incredibly useful ability for a Death Knight tank. As you're finishing off a pool, cast Chains of Ice on the last remaining mobs before they die. And that allows you to run away freely, and you seal their fate. Get a look at Omen over there on the right. It's the meter with the beige background. My threat is so high that it's impossible for DPS, as long as they don't taunt, to pull aggro off of me. So that leaves that mob in the dust, and your DPS can just have a field day with them, and the mob can't even touch you. And that gives you ample time to begin the next pull and generate tons of threat, so that your DPS can't pull threat off of you with these guys either. So I do the same thing for this pull here. We just take down the mobs like normal, and as long as I have good threat on them, which I use Omen to judge, as long as I have good threat on all of these mobs, I can cast Chains of Ice and continue moving. There we see Chains of Ice cast again, and the mob goes down without being able to deal any further damage to me. The tactic is even useful here in the Pit of Sauron as well. Even these big guys are susceptible to Chains of Ice. There he goes. He's still got a lot of health left, but the DPS aren't going to be able to pull threat off of me, and I'm effectively tanking the mob as I'm running away from him. Tanking doesn't necessarily mean standing there and taking damage. Tanking just means to protect your group. And here we have these ambushers. I managed to take only 2 here, and they're going to get the same treatment. Now I just Chains of Ice the last guy, and I'm good to go. The DPS can just have a field day with him. These spiders in Draktheron Keep like to try and run away to summon a bunch of little spiders that can be a real pain. So to prevent that, I use a combination of Death Grip and Chains of Ice to prevent the mobs from getting away, and just let my DPS finish them off. In the next room there's a boss fight, and the boss will summon up some adds that come at you from the hallway. Now it's tempting to use Death Grip on these adds, like this. But this puts the adds in melee range, and they can still get a couple of swings off on you. That's not necessarily the most efficient. Instead, what you might want to try is something like this. I'm going to put a Death and Decay in his path, and the Death and Decay will keep aggro, while the Chains of Ice holds him still. He can still shoot spells at me, but he was going to shoot spells anyway. Now I'm just avoiding his melee damage. Okay, we've talked enough about Chains of Ice. Now I want to talk about using Howling Blast in its ranged capacity to pull threat on mobs from afar, similar to how I used Death and Decay in Frost Tanking 101 Chapter 2. Notice how I'm purposely saving 1 Frost and 1 Unholy rune. I pan my camera around because I know all these little bugs are coming to attack my DPS and healers, so I target one and then use Howling Blast to pull them all to me. This way I don't have to move, and I can use Death and Decay to just hold them to me. Now my healer and DPS are clear of mobs, and I didn't have to do too much at all. All I had to do was pan my camera around, because you don't have to be facing the mobs to cast Howling Blast. You can even cast it on mobs behind you. This boss will summon those insects periodically, so again, I'm saving 1 Unholy and 1 Frost rune so that I can do this as many times as needed. Now let's talk a bit about Anti-Magic Shell. Most tanks will use Anti-Magic Shell in a very defensive capacity, only when there's an emergency. I don't agree with this because Anti-Magic Shell only has a 1-minute cooldown. You should be using it very often as a Death Knight tank. Ingvar, the last boss in Heroic Utgard Keep, dies once, and then he's resurrected. After he's resurrected, he does a high damage AoE ability, and I use Anti-Magic Shell to absorb most of the damage from that, and to give me a ton of runic power. Watch here. Not only did I take very little damage from that blast, but that blast also generated 59 runic power for me. That's about half of a Frost tank's runic bar. And runic power translates into rune strikes and frost strikes, which translates into damage, which translates into threat, making you overall a better tank. After this, it's just a matter of taking down Ingvar and you're good to go. I find Icken Crick in the Pit of Sauron to be quite the interesting boss. He's a newbie killer because basically if you don't know what to do against this boss, you're gonna die. If you don't know that you have to run away from pursuit, like this Shadow Priest here doesn't, you're gonna die, just like he does here. Similarly, if you don't know to get away from Poison Nova, you're gonna die, unless you're a Death Knight, and especially unless you're a tank. Here he goes with his Poison Nova, but I use Anti-Magic Shell here, and you can see that I survived this blast with very minimal damages, and it supercharged my runic bar because this is a very high damage ability. I gained 255 runic power. Now I only have room for about 130 runic power on my bar, but this overkill doesn't matter. It just means you're going to have a full runic bar, which again translates into frost strikes and rune strikes, and that translates into threat, and that translates into you being an overall better tank. Now notice how most of my party here is dead, including the healer. It's just me and another Death Knight. This seems like a pretty hopeless fight, right? I mean, the only surviving DPS is a Death Knight, so he can't heal me, and he's only pulling about 2400 DPS, and the tank has very low HP, and there's no healer. Believe it or not, we do walk away from this with a victory. We do take Icken Crick down without a healer and without the rest of the party. But I can't show you the rest of that video here. It goes on for a few more minutes, and I do want to talk about some stuff in this fight, but I don't have enough time because of the YouTube 10-minute limit to fill it all in the rest of this video. So I'm going to make a separate video about it after this one, so keep an eye out for that. Well guys, that'll about do it for the Frost Tanking 101 series. I made these videos because in the future I plan to make videos about running the different heroics in the game, and I didn't want to keep explaining these tips and tricks over and over again in each video as I do them. If you haven't seen the other 3 videos in the Frost Tanking 101 series, I hope you'll go watch them now, and I hope you'll get something useful out of them. Thanks for watching these videos, guys. If you like them, please rate them high. If you didn't like them, please rate them low. And if you really like them, please subscribe so you can see my future stuff. Until next time, guys, go out and have fun. Cheers.